Well, if there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, it's that he...
By the way, I won't threat Donald not to send electricity.
Related to the European Union, it was very clear from Trudeau's arrival here in Brussels that they feel very warmly.
Canada's bold move to ban U.S. oil exports and forge a 0% tariff trade deal with the European Union has sent shockwaves through global markets. This seismic shift is a strategic play reshaping energy alliances and leaving the U.S. scrambling for solutions. With energy security, geopolitical leverage, and billions of dollars at stake, the fallout from this decision is anything but ordinary.
Come and attack Ontario, you attack livelihoods of people of Ontario and Canadians. We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to defend Ontarians and Canadians across the border.
Canada's bold decision to shift its oil exports and trade priorities is a tectonic shift that's leaving its biggest trading partner, the U.S., reeling. For decades, the energy relationship between these two neighbors was a cornerstone of North American economic stability. But with recent U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods and oil, Canada seems to have decided enough is enough.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum too.
It all started with the U.S. imposing heavy tariffs on Canadian imports: steel, aluminum, and crucially, oil. These tariffs were economic penalties and provocations. Canada, a country that supplied nearly half of the U.S.'s oil imports, found itself in an unexpected position, rethinking its energy dependency. If the U.S. could weaponize trade to this extent, why should Canada continue to rely so heavily on its neighbor? And so began the shift.
So the answer to that is to stop being stupid and start building LNG plants.
Canada's reliance on the U.S. as its primary oil market has always been a double-edged sword. And now, with 50% of U.S. oil imports coming from Canada, the implications of losing that source are seismic for American energy policy. The U.S. is now scrambling. Without Canadian oil, refineries in the Midwest face logistical nightmares, skyrocketing costs, and uncertain supply chains. This is a full-blown energy crisis in the making. Decades of carefully maintained energy interdependence are unraveling, and the shockwaves are being felt across industries, from technology to manufacturing.
The word tariff, properly used, is a beautiful word. One of the most beautiful words I've ever heard. It's music to my ears.
But this didn't happen overnight. The first cracks appeared when Trump's administration aggressively pursued tariffs under the guise of protecting American industries. At the time, it might have seemed like a strong negotiating tactic, but for Canada, it was the final straw.
It would be better for Canada to be the 28th EU member.
Now, Canada is rewriting the playbook, and the world is paying attention. The country is aggressively pivoting towards Europe and Asia, securing deals that completely bypass the U.S. The Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, is a prime example. With this framework, Canada has laid the groundwork to ship its oil and gas to European nations, eager to replace Russian energy.
Reflecting very much upon the nature of our relationship with our largest trading partner. I mean, it's important to understand that Canada exports something north of 75% of our goods and services to our neighbor to the south.
And it's not just Europe. Asia is rising as a major player in Canada's energy future. Japan, South Korea, and even China are eyeing Canadian LNG exports with renewed interest. Projects like the Trans Mountain expansion are tripling Canada's capacity to transport oil to Tidewater, ensuring that their resources can reach these global markets without ever crossing U.S. borders.
Doing this will hurt America really badly.
The timing couldn't be worse for the U.S. As Canada opens the floodgates to Europe and Asia, American policymakers are left scrambling to deal with the fallout. While Canada diversifies its trade partners, the U.S. faces an energy landscape where it can no longer take Canadian oil for granted.
Canada's leaders are apparently rethinking their ties to the United States. They're turning to another partner, also targeted by Trump's tariffs, an ally on the other side of the Atlantic.
This isn't just about economics, it's about global influence. By securing 0% tariff trade deals with Europe and Asia, Canada is reshaping the energy map and carving out a position of power. For decades, the US held the upper hand in energy diplomacy. But now, with Canada stepping into the spotlight, the balance of power is shifting in ways that could redefine not just North American trade, but global energy markets as a whole.
Any tariffs on Canada will mean higher prices for Americans and will cost American jobs.
The US is staring down an unprecedented energy crisis, one that it inadvertently helped create. With Canada actively reducing its reliance on the US, cracks in the foundation of American energy security are becoming glaringly obvious.
From the Alberta perspective, under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports.
But oil isn't the only concern. The interconnected grid of cross-border electricity transmission between Canada and the US has long been a lifeline for states like New York and Vermont. Canadian hydropower accounts for up to 10% of the electricity used in the northeastern US. If Canada redirects this energy to other markets, it's not just higher utility bills Americans would face. Entire regions could be at risk of blackouts during peak demand.
This sort of cluster in around 5% pay cut for the economy as a whole. It's pretty significant stuff. Takes 2 years for it to reach that point.
And let's not forget the US tech industry, which consumes energy at an unprecedented rate. Data centers, which power everything from AI to cloud computing, are particularly energy hungry. A single hyperscale data center can use as much electricity as 80,000 homes in a year. Without Canada's steady supply of energy, operational costs for these centers could skyrocket, sending ripples through industries that depend on them. States like Virginia, home to the largest concentration of data centers globally, would be among the hardest hit.
Canadian oil and gas that would be carried in the Keystone XL. Who in heaven's name does he think is going to build that?
The roots of this crisis trace back to the US's own trade policies. When the US imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum in 2018, it sparked a trade war that has only escalated since. Initially, the idea was to strengthen domestic industries, but the move ended up backfiring spectacularly.
He's going to punish us. We don't need Canadian oil. He told that to the World Economic Forum. And now he says, let's build Keystone. Let's get a lot more Canadian oil down here. And by the way, I'm going to tax it with a tariff, because tariffs are taxes.
Canada's response was swift and calculated. Retaliatory tariffs targeted key American exports, including Tesla vehicles and agricultural products like soybeans and pork. The decision to target Tesla was particularly shrewd, as Canada is one of the company's largest markets outside the US. By 2024, these tariffs had cost US exporters over $12 billion annually. But the real burden fell on American consumers. The Peterson Institute for International Economics reported in 2024 that the average US household was paying an additional $600 annually due to the escalating trade war.
Government's talking about it. It's businesses signing deals that involve real money because they know that this is going to be needed in the coming years.
The liquefied natural gas, LNG sector, is another area where Canada is making big moves. Projects like LNG Canada and British Columbia are poised to turn the country into a top 5 global LNG exporter by 2030. These developments have attracted investment from major players like Japan, South Korea, and Germany, solidifying Canada's position as a leader in the global LNG market.
It was very clear from Trudeau's arrival here in Brussels that they feel very warmly towards the EU.
Europe's role in this drama cannot be overstated. With the war in Ukraine disrupting Russian energy supplies, Europe has been scrambling for reliable alternatives. In 2020, Canadian energy exports to Europe surged by 28%, signaling a clear shift in global energy dynamics. While the US grapples with the fallout of its trade policies, Canada is capitalizing on Europe's urgent need for secure energy sources. The geopolitical ripples from Canada's energy shift are shaking up alliances across continents. In Asia, the stakes are sky high. Japan, South Korea, and even China are seizing opportunities created by Canada's strategic pivot.
If President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us.
The fractured relationship between Canada and the US is also setting a dangerous global precedent. Energy exporting nations are watching closely, taking notes on how trade wars and aggressive tariffs can push even the most interdependent allies apart. For Canada, the shift is a signal of resilience and adaptability. For the US, it's a wake-up call about the fragility of its energy security and its waning influence in global trade. Subscribe to the channel to see how this energy showdown unfolds and what it means for the future of global power dynamics.